But the simple story was this, that we can better develop efficiencies along the value chain and along our processes if we are prepared to address clustering as a viable solution. We need to be able to pool common services in relation to administration, in relation to accounting, in relation to human resources advice. We need to be able to have synergistic relationships in relation to design, in relation to distribution, in relation to marketing. And that in and of itself sustains other categories of small businesses whose dedicated purpose is the provision of that particular resource or skill. And I look at some of you in this room who are already doing it, but the scale needs to be far greater. The example of Grace Kennedy is one equally that we addressed in relation to the food business. Many of you may not know that Grace Kennedy does not manufacture much of what it markets and distributes. What Grace has perfected is the art of being able to have a range of suppliers coming under common processes and common brand to be able to distribute and market such that not only in the Caribbean, but in the diaspora, their brand has gained acceptance and it has been easier to move the distribution of their product across a range of enterprises, supermarkets, other distribution channels, not just in the traditional North Atlantic markets, but indeed as far away as Australia and Asia as a result of being able to have that size. We have among us entities such as Farmer's Choice, and I defy anyone to tell me of a better tasting ham in the world or a better tasting bacon in the world. Similarly with Baiko, I defy anybody to tell me of a better tasting ice cream. But it is true, home drums beat first in these instances. But the point is that we need to use our established brands to be able to lead the way while expanding production, not by looking only at investment within that particular enterprise, but creating synergistic relationships that allow for the expansion of production to support that brand. At the end of the day, Barbados is a dot. Our share in the trade of global goods is 0.000%. Our share in the trade of global services is 0.001%. And unless we realize that we need to pool both to reduce our costs and enhance our profitability, but at the same time enhance our competitiveness to admit a further penetration, we will not be able to make the transitions that are necessary and to see sectors and enterprises succeed in the absence of the tools available previously to generations of Barbadians. Similarly, we need to see greater synergy among and across sectors. I have argued for some time now that the decline in the garment sector is one that ought not to have happened in the way in which it has happened, and that the opportunities that exist for our fashion designers, our garment producers, and our artists and sportsmen to be able to create a brand and to be able to develop a niche in relation to those things that may be peculiar to us in the region ought not to pass us by. That's why I don't have it in thanks to us. The truth is that if you take an Alison Hines or an Obadele when just after the Olympics, there is no reason why the example led by a P. Diddy or other artists in terms of using their image and using the designers that we have who are world class, but who don't have the capital base, once again, because they don't have the money to buy the equipment, to do the things that are necessary to produce, etc. And yet we have West Indian Sea Island cotton that people fight across the globe for. Makes no sense. So that synergistic approach can lead to the development of enterprises that can make a definable difference. How many people in this room can change their approach and their outlook to see themselves benefiting from synergies that hitherto we would not have and that hitherto we may even have scoffed at, believing that the territorial approach of control is the appropriate approach to move forward in. You may say that at the end of the day, many of these businesses, yes, are undercapitalized, and that is true. But we need to be able to recognize and to place pressure for more avenues and more instruments that open up the market. Microleasing. I believe fervently, and we'd started the process, and it is in the industrial sector plan, and I believe that the IDC has accepted the worthiness of it, and I look forward to them being able to execute it in the future. That if we can provide factory shelves with equipment and allow for microleasing, that a lot of the smaller entrepreneurs who are now being excluded, whether it is in furniture, whether it is in fashion, whatever area it is, particularly where people are not capable of receiving funding to make the technological improvements to enhance their competitiveness, that if we can do that, we can allow many of our small entrepreneurs to be able to jump over the curve and in fact become more competitive in this particularly difficult environment. And what do I refer to in particular? I recall, for example, that there were only 2 furniture manufacturers in Barbados who use computer-aided technology. No, that's not sufficient. I recall that there is only a small percentage of our fishing sector who benefit from boats with the most modern sonar technology that can in fact reduce the use of diesel, because if you have the technology, you can easier go to the fish grounds without having to waste the diesel to get there. And these are the areas that, in my view, and I will come to some of the things that I feel that the Small Business Association needs to lobby government specifically for at the end of my speech, which will tie back into that. I also believe that we need to recognize that innovation is not creativity, but it is the commercialization of creativity. Creativity abounds in this region. We have Nobel laureates, we have calypsonians, we have cricketers who have their own flair, we have creativity from the man in the street who will tell you a few choice words in a way that brings up metaphors that you would never dream that he could put together. But how do we bottle that? How do we commercialize that? And one of the things that struck me when I was Minister of Education is that the very same child who is creative on the outside, who is creative in the playing field, who is creative in even the dance hall, on the, as an athlete, once they enter the classroom, once they enter the workplace, once they enter the church, that creativity dissipates. And we as a nation have to ask ourselves, what is it about us and our systems and our institutions that does not value the enhancement and the utilization of creativity in the productive things that we do? And how can we change that mindset? How can we as a people recognize that our competitive advantage will not come from producing clothes, because you can produce clothes cheaper in China. You can produce clothes cheaper in Costa Rica. Our competitive advantage will not come from producing furniture. You can produce furniture cheaper in China and Guyana. But what are the things that will give us that distinctive edge that causes people to want to pay that extra value that is necessary for 2 reasons? One, because of our scale, our small population size, and our high quality of life does in fact mean higher costs. But I don't know that we want to reverse the trend so absolutely that we have such low costs that our quality of life is equally lowered, and that the one thing that we can market to the world, our stability, is taken away from us. That's not what we want. So we have to get that distinctive edge in order to continue to support the quality of life, which unfortunately has a higher cost structure, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, than other countries that may be competing with us. We have distinct products and distinct aspects of our history that have to be exploited. I spoke of West Indian Sea Island cotton. Our rum industry reached a peak in 2007 of $67 million. But the word rum comes from where? It comes from Barbados. And in those days, before it was rum, it was kill devil. They obviously knew something that we learned by experience. But rum was spelled R-H-U-M. And those who are connoisseurs of rum know that Barbados has a special place in the history of the development of rum. But yet our rum industry is a $67 million industry, when in truth and in fact, we should be seeking to track a $1 billion rum industry in the next decade. And how can we achieve that? Is it going to come purely from Mount Gay and West Indies rum refineries and Foursquare alone? Or can they expand in such a way so as to incorporate many more small entrepreneurs from the agricultural sector right back through to the end of the value chain that allows us to treat this as our major national export as a good? China has 100 million people in its middle class, and the numbers are growing rapidly each year. And the Chinese who have gone into the middle class, they're starting to go to Europe, they're drinking whiskey, they're drinking brandy. But like everyone else, that's where they start. And then they realize, well, we've been doing this for a while, let's do something a little more exotic. That's why we moved to get approved destination status for Barbados and other Caribbean countries. Because it's only a matter of time before they start coming here. Rum is already available there, but not in the scale and not with the brands that we would like to see. What are we doing to reposition, recognizing that the effort of those large enterprises to expand will not be sufficient, but the collective effort of the entrepreneurs of Barbados and the government of Barbados can carry us closer to that point. Similarly, apart from rum and Sea Island cotton, and let me say on Sea Island cotton, one of the things that I believe strongly is that 50% of our output of Sea Island cotton should be marketed to top designers in the world, as we were trying to do just before we lost government, and the other 50% available to local designers at a reduced cost, recognizing that most of our local designers cannot afford to be able to compete at that level. But if you have a global product, charge a global premium, and then reserve to your people access to the product at a cheaper level, such that we can now compete, because what we are showing is in fact a product in demand in the rest of the world. Similarly, we have other aspects of our culture that ought to be exploited. Some intangible, from cricket to our entertainment. Those are the things that we need to be able to do. And this brings me to the next point of strategic partnerships with established extra-regional enterprises. Why do we believe that we must continue in this day of age of technology and open markets to take responsibility for every aspect of what we do? One of the biggest clusters of companies is in fact distribution of games companies. Companies that dedicate themselves to distribute toys and games. And we have in the North American and European diaspora a population that is equal to what we have here within the region. But we are not making the connections to be able to go to them and either license or ask for them to distribute products that can be equally available to our brothers and sisters and family in the Caribbean diaspora who long to be able to buy things that give their children a sense of who they are and where they are.